What's cooking, folks? Vermillion Phoenix here, and today I am here with a character overview for everyone's favorite feline assassin, Midnight. Midnight, the Twilight Razor, is an assassin of sorts in the Orcs Must Die universe, and so she's very good at dealing high damage over a very short period of time to a small group of enemies. While she does have some AoE abilities, they're on a rather long cooldown at the moment, so you're really only going to be dealing a ton of damage to a few enemies at a time. She's not really built for purely AoE damage, and that's okay because the damage that she can deal to single targets is some of, if not the best in the game. The high mobility and high burst damage that Midnight grants is going to be countered by the fact that her HP is extremely low, especially considering the fact that she's a character that's going to be in melee range. This means that you're going to want to make sure that you are either very handy with prowling to drop aggro, or you want to pack on abilities or traits that allow you to either rapidly restore your health or to take less damage, thereby extending her effective health pool. Now regarding Prowl is an ability that allows you to drop all aggression currently on your hero. This will prevent enemies that are in the middle of their attack animations, if they're melee attacks, from being able to hit you as long as the animation hasn't reached the point where it deals damage. And it will also allow you to move through groups of enemies effectively undetected unless they are firing some sort of projectile or dealing an area of effect damage attack and you happen to be in the area at the time. So it is a useful tool for both staying alive and preventing yourself from taking damage if you get surrounded, as well as getting from point A to B as you get a movement speed increase while Prowl is active. When dealing damage coming out of Prowl, enemies are stunned before the damage is dealt, and Midnight's passive increases damage to stunned enemies by 50%. This means that Prowl, even though it has a short cooldown, effectively acts as a intermittent 50% damage buff to all of Midnight's direct damage dealing skills, which is really nice. So let's talk about the ways that Midnight can actually deal damage, starting with her primary attack, Shadow Swipe. Regardless of some of the attacks that currently exist on Shadow Swipe, it doesn't actually do anything special on its own. Midnight's passive gives it a damage boost when enemies are stunned, but enemies that are slowed or otherwise have their speed hampered do not appear to take bonus damage at this time. That said, it's a relatively fast melee attack, attacking about twice a second, with the first slash being slightly faster than the first. That said, it's going to allow Midnight a higher damage resolution than a lot of other melee characters, and so you will be able to get out more attacks and spread your damage across more enemies quickly. And this is partially what leads her to dealing so much damage, in addition to the fact that with stuns she deals even more. Now, while her primary attack will deal a good amount of damage in a small area, her secondary attack will deal a high amount of damage to a single target and will add a small damage over time effect, helping to whittle down the HP of enemies like soldiers and barbarians who have that steady health shield. Either way, it is one of the highest damage attacks in the game and is known for taking out bosses in relatively few strikes. At my level, 2 hits will kill most bosses on the upper difficulty levels of the game, and that's even without enemies being stunned. So it's very powerful and is definitely an asset to any team if you need to take out high health enemies. And because high health enemies, like the heavy units and bosses in the game, are more than likely to get to your rift before anything else with a proper setup, this makes Midnight's skill set particularly invaluable, especially when mixed with her crowd control abilities. Rounding out Midnight's list of damage dealing skills, we have her unique ability, Dash and Slash. This propels Midnight over about 4 units of trap space and will deal damage to every enemy she passes through. When combined with Prowl, this will increase the damage by 50% due to the stun bonus and stun every enemy that she passes through. This is the best way for Midnight to deal with large volumes of light minions, as well as helping her get through large groups of minions quickly to get to priority targets such as archers and bosses. So it's a very important skill to remember to use correctly, but it also has the longest cooldown of all of her skills at about 15 seconds. So now that we've gone over the skills, it's a good idea to look at the combo potential that the character themselves possesses. There's a few things to look at here, but essentially Midnight possesses 4 abilities that are able to generate combo points. I'm going to include a short montage of those abilities here, but to be succinct, that is going to be her primary attack, Shadow Swipe, her secondary attack, Vital Strike, her signature ability, Dash and Slash, and her Poison Paw, Weaver. Now, it is very difficult to actually get all of these to trigger together due to the fact that Dash and Slash has both a movement component to it as well as a 15-second cooldown, in addition to the fact that Vital Strike has some very interesting interactions with how it hits enemies and the direction you're moving, and also because Poison Paw counts its combo point timer, which is about 2 seconds for anybody that doesn't know, from the initial moment of contact. So to run through an enemy and then immediately try to strike them, and then Prowl itself being on about a 4-second cooldown, Midnight is not going to be a character that you're going to see scoring a lot of really high point games. That being said, there's 2 things that Midnight does that seems like, based on previous information about the game, that you should probably get combo points for that you don't. And I'm going to speak on those just briefly. First, whenever Midnight prowls, it appears that the enemy is stunned before any damage is dealt from the ability that takes her out of prowl. This means that if you prowl and use your primary attack, it deals 50% more damage because the enemy is stunned. Usually when an ability stuns an enemy, it triggers a combo point. That is not the case for Prowl on pretty much anything. So that feels like a missed opportunity there, and maybe at some point the developers may get the opportunity to take a look at that again. Second is on the Tier 4 Weaver for Vital Strike. I can't remember the name for it right now, but I'll probably drop it as a video comment somewhere so that you guys are aware of which one it is. It causes a explosion of knockback around the enemy. It doesn't deal any damage, but any enemy that is caught in the knockback effect that is not heavy gets hit with the bonus physics damage. Now, with certain abilities, this will add a combo point. For Vital Strike specifically, it does not. And while I don't expect it to actually do anything to the initial enemy struck, because that enemy has to die for the explosion to happen, it should trigger an additional combo point on enemies affected by it because it's another ability. So that would be something that, if possible, I hope the devs are able to look at and sort of change, because combo points are important due to the fact that they not only increase your score, but they also increase the rate that you gain additional experience, coin, and your Unchained meter fills. So it's pretty integral to certain parts of the game, and by missing it on certain abilities, it sort of weakens the character, even if raw DPS is there. And now we move on to the Weavers. Weavers offer you the ability to tailor your character's playstyle towards the situations that you'll be encountering on any given map, and the choices should be weighted against what you currently need versus, some generic concept of what is good for the character, as what's good changes over the particular course of how you've played the game and what's available to you. Either way, feeling frisky drastically reduces the respawn time so that death is not as big of a deal for you. It's extremely useful if you're playing solo and happen to die often, especially with Midnight's low health pool. Hardened Killer is a sort of supplement to that. It offers you a different sort of longevity by increasing your health regeneration by 1.5%. It's more important as your HP pool increases. Then we have Prolonged Prowl, which is probably the most useful later. It allows you to prowl without the 15 mana activation cost, allowing you to use your mana in many different ways. For the tier 2 weavers, we have Nimble as Night, Samurai Armor, and Cat Purse. All of these are actually extremely good weavers. The Nimble as Night Weaver will allow you to move extremely fast while prowling, which gives Midnight some of the fastest land movement in the game, if not the fastest outright. The only character that can even attempt to match that is Blackpaw, so it's really good on large maps. Samurai Armor is another buff to Midnight's survivability, allowing her to take much less physical damage, and a lot of the damage in the game is going to be physical. Then we have Cat Purse, which is a supplemental increase to your coin. Basically, the larger the pool of enemy HP and the less damage you deal, the more coin you can make. So it is even better in groups than it is solo. Tier 3 is where things get really interesting for Midnight. We have Poison Paw, which allows her to place a damage over time effect on enemies, as well as slowing them by 50% for the duration of it, which is extremely useful, especially against grouped up enemies, though it is hard to combo. Then we have Slash and Dash, which is a buff to dash and slash, which increases the damage by 50%. Good if you have a lot of small minions to take out repeatedly, and the prowl damage buff applies to that 50% as well, so you can rack up some extremely nice damage with it. Then we have Feline Fugitive, which both gives her control resistance, allowing her to be slowed and stunned for a shorter period of time, as well as increasing the amount of control effects that she causes, which allows her to stun enemies and slow them longer, especially since you should be prowling on everything. So overall, really nice choices, and you should choose what will work best for your situation. Rounding out the tier 4 weavers, we have Kitty Overkill, which will give you a knockback explosion on the death of an enemy. I touched on this a bit earlier, but essentially the larger the enemy, the greater the area of the knockback and the stronger the knockback distance becomes. Now, for any enemy that is not a boss mercenary or heavy enemy, it will be hit with the bonus 4 times damage from physics, so it is useful in that regard, though it does not seem to add a combo point, which I believe is probably a misstep and may be changing in the future. That's something that I hope anyway. Either way, it's a solid ability. Then we have Sharing the Shadow. Sharing the Shadow allows you to prowl your teammates, and it allows them to effectively drop their aggro as well and get a small movement speed buff. Now, it is a bit difficult to use unless your team is highly coordinated, so your mileage may vary, but an interesting skill nonetheless. Then we have Thrill of the Kill. Thrill of the Kill is Midnight's most powerful self-sustaining weaver, giving her a 5% heal every time she scores a kill. Due to her high damage and the ability to deal it rapidly, you can, in many cases, refill your HP very fast. From there, we're going to go ahead and take a look at traits, just so I can say what my particular opinions are on traits that are beneficial to Midnight. Here are the traits that I believe are best used with Midnight. We have Bear Hugs and Killer Buzz, both from the Pentagon group, which will significantly increase your damage even further with all of the lovely damage bonuses that Midnight can rack up, allowing you to take down individual or handfuls of targets very, very quickly. Then, to help to sustain your life and control your enemies a bit better, we have Enjoys Pain, which will allow you to regain your health faster than almost any other regeneration in the game due to how high her damage output is. We have High Pain Tolerance and Extra Padding, which will increase your effective HP by allowing you to take less damage per hit, so stacking those is very useful. And then we have Respect My Authority, which will allow you to stun enemies or slow them even longer than you already do, and this stacks very well with the Feline Fugitive passive. From there, we go into the triangle slot, which you have options for some HP and mana regeneration. We're going to focus on the HP regeneration because while HP regeneration on its own is still relatively weak for Midnight due to her low HP pool, she has the ability to stack heals in such a way that it still becomes useful, and when paired with the abilities that reduce the damage that she takes, like Samurai Armor as a weaver, or the 2 diamond shaped damage reduction traits that are in this list, then she can survive quite a bit better than she does by default. So overall, Midnight has a good amount of pros and cons. She's not great at dealing with hundreds of enemies at once. However, individual groups of enemies she can take down rather quickly, so she kind of works like a lawnmower as a hero, slicing down enemies on the front lines and retreating when things get a little bit too hectic for her rather than staying in the middle of the fight. She's very mobile, and because of that, she's going to be very useful when you have multiple gate maps or maps that you need to finish quickly rather than allowing enemies to pass for a long period of time or to specific kill boxes. And because of that, she is very agile in being able to deal with multiple kill boxes at once rather than a large one. This makes her more suited to, in my opinion, survival rather than things like endless, and that's mainly just going to be because of her very low health pool, again being lower than every other melee character in the game at the moment and lower than a lot of the ranged characters as well. So while she's a very good character, I would rate her usability at slightly difficult, just because you will die a lot until you get used to how you need to engage and disengage from enemies. But overall, I think that is also what makes her fun and different from a lot of the other characters. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Let me know if you guys feel that I missed anything with the character as far as what her quirks or usability is, and I'll see if I can either make an addendum to this or improve that for the next character overview. Other than that, I'm going to move on and we'll see who I decide to do next, but there's a few other topics I want to cover as well. So thank you guys for watching. As always, I sincerely appreciate it. I hope you learned something from this. If you have, feel free to leave me a comment or let me know what you wanted to learn next time. And as always, I greatly appreciate it. Until next time, have a good one, folks.